Tactics then, in their simplest form, the things you do to achieve a strategic objective. Typically comes with some military connotations, but not necessarily so. For this episode, I have a plan. A classic three-pronged attack. Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. I would say I first became aware of tactics when I was about 5, learning to play chess. Now, you might say, well, chess, that's a strategic game. And yeah, when you're good. When you're learning chess, I would argue that all the time you're being reactive. You might, after a little while, get a few opening moves, but then beyond that, you are firefighting. You're using tactical thinking to respond to moves that your opponent makes. So that was my introduction. Later on, I started to pick up other kind of 2-player games, and a favourite of mine to this day, although it's pretty simple, is Stratego. In that, you do have a strategy because you set your strategy at the outset by deploying your forces, and you're attempting to capture the enemy flag. And once again, like you find in many of these types of games, there is a tactical element as well as a strategic element. Things happen, you have to adapt. Now, I like these types of games, but I enjoy role-playing games. And we might think of tactical play being like the combat and moving about on a grid and maybe sort of some crunchy kind of thinking, but really you're making tactical decisions all the time about what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean putting on a suit of camouflage and sneaking about in the bushes, making unusual hand gestures to each other. Not at all. It might be just the way you negotiate things, the way you respond to the circumstances as they arise. Also, another instance of what I think of as being tactics is as a DM, the way you are using improvisation in the game. If you are constantly going off a script or turning up to sessions with the spirit of wanting to play to find out what happens, that is going to involve a lot of tactical decisions. They might be purely random sometimes, but I would say a lot of the time you're making tactical decisions to achieve your strategic objective, which is to run a good game. And the tactics you use to do that are going to vary case by case, and every game is going to be different. So I think you need to be good at your tactics to be a good games master. Often, talking about tactics and strategy, I start to think about some of the kind of historically important people that have written about this stuff, like Sun Tzu, the Chinese. I think he was a general who wrote The Art of War. It's been translated many times, and business leaders will look at books like this and take away ideas that they can deploy in a commercial way. I've read it a long time ago. Don't remember too much about it now, but actually I think it's something I want to get hold of and have a look at again. In fact, hankering. Fernell, the guy who does ICRPG and Runehammer, was talking about this on a podcast of his not so long ago. I was listening to a podcast that I've discovered recently, and it's called Akimbo. Seth Godin goes on there. It's a very simple podcast. He'll talk about a topic, then he'll take questions at the end from previous episodes, much like the way Anchorite podcasters do their shows. We have this call-in thing. He does a similar thing through his website. I really enjoy this podcast. I find it very enlightening. And he was talking about the way our mind works. He gave... he's a great storyteller, and he was talking about how he was roasting some onions, slow-cooked onions, in the oven. Anyway, he ended up spilling some oil, setting fire to his oven. And the reason this happened was he burnt his finger, dropped the tray, spilt the oil. That wasn't a conscious decision. He was trying to make the point that human beings make what we might call tactical decisions in an interesting way. There's not this overseeing controller in your mind that every time has the final say on the way things are going to happen. We respond to all sorts of different stimuli. Sometimes this could be simple reflexes, sometimes considered thought, all different things. And if you ever surprise yourself by the way you've reacted in a situation, it will be these factors coming into play. And I found it really quite fascinating the way he was describing your decision making process as being similar to a board of directors or a company sat in a boardroom with various different departments, each department focusing their interest on one specific area of the business, and they're not always working together to come to the best or optimum solution, because each of them has got their own separate agenda. And if you think, that's pretty wild when you think about the way the human body and the mind works together. We're basically trying to make tactical decisions in a sort of a boardroom environment with all the different parts of ourselves trying to be the loudest voice in the room. And I thought that was really interesting and quite pertinent to today's prompt tactics. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to Old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.